Hi, I'm Nicola.
And I'm Julia.
And we're the project leaders from YMCA Malta on the My Voice to Europe project.
My Voice to Europe is an Erasmus Plus project co-funded by the European Union that is being administered through the European Union Programmes Agency.
My Voice to Europe has brought together a group of young people to share their thoughts, ideas, and research on topics that they deemed important for the Maltese Islands.
These young people have developed 13 important themes and produced 13 podcasts with stakeholders, young people, and professionals related to the theme.
Keep watching and engage with the discussion in the comments.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this podcast as part of the Voice for Europe project. I'm very happy to welcome all three of you here today so that we can learn more from you and your experience in relation to our topic today, which is youth and active citizenship. Before we get started, I think it would be great if we have some introductions. So I'll pass over to you to let us know who you are and maybe why you accepted to be here today, why you think this is important for you as well. Cara, shall we start with you?
Of course. So first of all, I'd like to thank you for the invitation. I'm very happy to be here to share my thoughts and to get input as well from Jeremy and Francesco and even yourself. So my name is Cara Aquilina. I'm 19 years old. I'm a law student and a student activist as well. Currently, I serve the position of United Nations Youth Delegate for Malta, as well as Maltese Changemaker for the More in 24 campaign, which is coordinated by the European Youth Card Association and Agenzia Zaza locally. I've been interested in foreign policy and international affairs and diplomacy from a very young age. And with whatever commitment I engage myself in, I really do try to prioritize active citizenship and really using my experience to be able to share what I've learned. So that same experience can help other people grow and help them achieve their goals to become more informed citizens. And ultimately, for the scope of the More 24 campaign, is to really help people become informed enough to make politically conscious decisions when casting their vote in the upcoming 2024 elections for the European Parliament elections. So that's it from my end.
Thank you, Cara. Francesco, would you like to go next?
Yes, sure. First of all, thanks a lot for your invitation. I'm really looking forward to share my thoughts and listen to Jeremy and Cara's ideas. I'm Francesco Giorgino. I'm 16 years old. I'm a first-year student at junior college. I'm studying Maltese and English. I'm also the co-founder and co-president now of Studenti Attivisti, a students group at junior college. We prioritize unbiased political views and discussions where we try to foster an environment for everyone to share their thoughts and think critically. I've been interested and enthusiastic about active citizenship throughout my life. I've been participating in the Children's Council, in CGUE, and various other activities. I've always been passionate about this, and I'm really looking forward for the podcast.
Thank you. Jeremy?
Hi, I'm Jeremy Mifsud Bonnici, the president of KSU, which is the National Student Council. I'll keep it as short and sweet as possible. So hi as well to the co-speakers. And basically, from my end, I've been involved in activism, I'd say, for the last 7-8 years, starting from the De La Salle Sixth Form Council, then moving on to Maltmun, and now into KSU as well. I think it's a very, very useful avenue for everyone, and I'm not going to take too much time so we can discuss.
Thank you all very much for your introductions, and that kind of brings me immediately to our next question. Yourselves as active citizens, what do you understand by active citizenship? What does it mean for anybody that maybe doesn't quite understand what could be or what signifies somebody who defines themselves as an active citizen? And go ahead, whoever wants to go first.
I'll go ahead with it because I think that mine may be a bit more controversial, perhaps. To me, I think active citizenship goes beyond simply organizing protests, attending protests, and fighting for these very big issues. I think that activism is simply being part of your community and being a useful member of your community. So it could be anything from as little as helping your older neighbor all the way to organizing protests. So I think that everyone who has some type of social utility in one way or another is an active citizen.
Okay.
I'd really like to bounce off of that point because I completely agree. Active citizenship essentially is the cornerstone of our democracy, and it's vital to sustain a healthy democracy. And as Jeremy rightly pointed out, it transcends beyond that sort of radical activism that we can see through the form of civil disobedience or protests, which are very, very important. But we cannot overlook the fact that you can be an active citizen by volunteering at your local parish church, by engaging in cleanup activities. So it's more of a philosophy and a mindset in which people feel empowered enough to be able to contribute towards the pursuit of the common good within their communities, within their societies at large, and then beyond that into the intersectionality and interconnectedness of global issues. So really, it's that deep commitment towards striving towards positive change and upholding the democratic values that we hold dear to our hearts, or at least I can speak on behalf of myself, that I prioritize in what I do.
I completely agree with both of you, and I'd even take it a step further. To be an active citizenship, in my opinion, you just need to stay informed on what's happening around you. Even by just doing that, you're still contributing a lot to your society and the community around you. If you know what's happening in politics, for example, from both sides, that's a huge plus.
Fantastic. So I can see, so as three very active people, you are recognizing that there's different ways that we can be active in society, and it's not necessarily the priority of every day of your life, but even in little ways, by being informed, by being able to contribute in little ways, this is still a way to be an active citizen. So what would you say perhaps prevents or discourages young people from being engaged in civic activities or being an active citizen in general?
I can jump in on this because I have a long list. I'm not going to mention it all, but just to go into a few pointers, we can definitely mention how, for example, let's take the context of the EU, saying that, my campaign More in 24, when I identified, okay, do young people want to vote, for example, because voting in elections is a part of being an active citizen. And then I started to analyze, okay, why wouldn't certain young people be inclined to vote as automatically as others, for example? You have marginalized and underrepresented groups of youth who aren't represented enough to be able to foster that confidence within themselves to be active citizens. You have socioeconomic disparities, you have limited access to education, um, the inability to use or certain technological facilities, digital illiteracy, and a point which may not automatically come to people's mind, but that I ruminate quite often, is the fact that, for example, in institutions of the European Union, they seem so detached and vague and abstract, even though we are aware of the way that EU policies are formulated and how they impact our lives. But unfortunately, the inner workings of the Parliament, for example, in Brussels, it can create that sort of disconnect because of the very technical jargon that's incorporated into resolutions and negotiations. And so, what I really try to do through that project is the demystification of this technical jargon, translating it into accessible and relatable language for it to be more attractive and magnetic, especially when placed on social media platforms. Not saying that young people cannot understand that complex language, they most certainly can, but portraying it in that way, especially on social media platforms, would help foster more engagement and a more automatic inclination to learn more and stay more informed about these things.
I'll go last.
To continue with Cara's point, I believe also that time management is a big constraint. For example, we tend to have our day filled with schoolwork, so some people don't find that time to be active citizens, I'm sorry. And also, unfortunately, through the history of our country as well, there's been this thing where you need to either be involved in church institutions, for example, in your locality, which some people might disassociate with that, or you can be involved in political organizations, which also might bounce people off of them. So I believe that some organizations, unfortunately, do not have access to that advertisement to capture the interests of youths. So some people don't even know what's happening around them because they don't have access to the information, as mentioned perfectly by Cara as well.
Okay, and so I'm going to jump in here because I know Jeremy is going to continue. What about student organizations? Would that count as active citizenship? And kind of, would that then offer an alternative then to the parish or the political activism?
Most definitely. I think that actually student activism is one of those opportunities where you can actually start making a lot of people's lives better and different, because of the reach you have, because of the presence you have, because of the facilities, the tools that you have at hand, but also because you at that point you also have garnered some level of life experience. I echo a lot with what both Cara and Francesco mentioned. But I also think that it goes beyond that. And to a certain extent, we do give ourselves a bit too many excuses as well. So I think that in the sense that very often, yes, time management is an issue. And there are a lot of people who don't manage to keep up with everything. But again, there's so many different levels of how you can be engaged and even a certain level of, I wouldn't call it a lack of bravery, but a lack of exposure, because and with it there's an element of fear, just because, as previously mentioned, there's kind of the whole partisan idea of activism, which is that if you are protesting against this specific issue, which coincidentally the government is in favor of, then boom, you are anti-government. When in reality, it's so much deeper than that. I mean, even in my experience as KSU, I've had very, very lovely and very tough conversations with both sides of the house, because the reality is that you can't agree on everything with everyone. And again, with this element of fear, there is some truth to it, because I am aware, even from experience, that there's a number of students who attended the KSU protest and were given a talking to at work. So that is a reality. But I also believe that it comes from an element of lack of knowledge. Not because there isn't enough knowledge out there, but because there is an oversaturation. So we get so much all the time because this official did this official did this country is doing this right now, that you become to a certain extent disincentivized or desensitized. But also you're also like, oh, what the hell am I going to do? In the sense that there's so many problems that it's very difficult to achieve anything. But the reality is the contrary. And I think that I managed to do this also with my colleagues who are part of KSU, where at the beginning of the year, there was a certain fear within them. But when I got them to experience firsthand the plight of, for example, Isabel Bonnici, this completely changed. And from being the most fearful of numbers to the most ferocious and the highest veracity. So I think that this exposure of what can it actually achieve by being present and understanding really what is at stake because of this oversaturation, I think is one of the biggest factors.
Okay, so then kind of on the same wavelength. So how can we encourage young people to be more active, even in little ways? What are the benefits? What are the starting points?
I think that from the point of view of what the benefits are, I think that the soft skills and the network that you build are more than enough already. But I do also think that the best way to actually get them into it is by just giving them that one opportunity, that one chance of getting involved, by targeting something that they truly care about and would love to see change. I think that is the quickest way from my end.
I completely agree with Jeremy. The fact that it has to be integrated from a very young age. I am a firm believer of that. And I feel like we really need to invest more in civic education for younger children. And speaking from my personal experience, when I was young, I was already very engaged. So it was a progression thanks to everything, my nature, my nurture, my upbringing. So the school environment is also a very important nurturing factor in harnessing the potential within people to become active citizens, because active citizens are made at the end of the day, but passive observers are easier to create than active citizens. We need to make that point there. But when it comes to having that first opportunity where you feel useful, you feel recognized, and you have that sort of sense of that awarding, fulfilling, satisfying sense, especially from a young age, really helps build your self-esteem and your self-confidence. And then there's a ripple effect. It continues from there. From one experience, you network, you meet people, who are older than you possibly and who can serve as mentors, and they impart their own experiences. And then you can create different connections with people and different experiences. And it's ultimately a progression that leads you to pursuing the career that you want. And maybe you can pair that career with the activism that you engage in, or they can be completely separate domains, or they can be interlinked in one way. I feel that the beauty of being active and investing your time, effort, and contributions into something that you really care for, movements that you really support, is being able to use your own expertise and your own specializations in your career, and having sort of that transfer of skill and transfer of knowledge and idea exchange. And I feel like it's so cohesive and harmonious when those things happen, and it really helps create a fabric of society which is holistic and which really prioritizes using everyone's skills for the benefits of society towards reaching the common good, because that's the ultimate goal, in my opinion.
Yeah, but I think
To add to this as well, I think it isn't emphasized enough on how you can be an activist on any topic, on any subject of your liking. For example, I took this path because during our educational years in secondary school, for example, in social studies, we talked about democracy, and I was like, Cara, this is really interesting. How can I actively participate in this? And then you go down the amazing rabbit hole of finding more opportunities, more things that you can engage in. Then you start going on Erasmus, you start participating in debates. There are many opportunities. So if we find a way to bind education in schools with activism on all subjects, for example, sciences, technology, maybe that can spark what other people are interested in, and they'd go down the journey into becoming active citizens.
Yes, and I think I was an active student myself at my time at university, both locally and internationally, and a lot of you pinpointed the value it has in terms even of soft skills. So, Francesco, you're mentioning being passionate about specific things, and then you're developing more in that area, and that could lead to other opportunities. And from my experience as well, a lot of this is voluntary, right? So, what would you say kind of, how does volunteer work play into character building? What is the value of volunteering your time towards a cause you believe in, or even a societal cause that you think is important?
If I may start with this, for me, volunteering is something really beautiful. You get to meet people from all walks of life. You get to enrich and continue opening your mind to different scenarios different mentalities. And I believe that that's the core of what an active citizenship is. And that's the core of what makes a person understanding of others, which continues building strong societies. So volunteering is a really enriching opportunity, and we need to find ways on making it more accessible and closer to youths, because you don't need to be an adult to volunteer. You can be a student or even a child. You can get active in your local council. You can participate in cleanups, in shelters. You can do it at any age. You can do it on anything. And I think that that needs to be made clear to capture that spirit.
Definitely, and what you said, Francesco, about that empathy and that altruism and that resilience in the scheme of character development that volunteering really contributes to, I feel is so important in the development of soft skills, and not only just soft skills, even, those core skills like communication, teamwork, leadership, problem solving, and formation of values as well. Because when you decide that you want to contribute to certain projects which align with your interests and your passions, it becomes meaningful to you. So you carry that sense of social responsibility. And that leads us to the fact that active citizenship, it's a right and a responsibility. It's an obligation, but overall, I feel as for myself, it's a privilege to be an active citizen. And there are so many opportunities to volunteer in Malta, and I think it's quite overlooked in the scheme of volunteering itself. For example, there's the European Solidarity Corps. I had done a volunteering project with this NGO called Generation Change in coordination with the European Solidarity Corps, which brought a group of Irish students, young people, to Malta. And I was the only Maltese person in this group of Irish people. So it was fantastic because it taught me, cultural sensitivity, cultural exchange. We embarked on many different projects, like boat restoration, for example. We volunteered at the soup kitchen, at a cat sanctuary, and it was very fun, very fulfilling. And at the end of it, I just felt so complete because even the nature of the tasks themselves, we dealt with animals, we dealt with people at the soup kitchen, we dealt with young people at the migrant induction hub as well. So I feel like it's really important. And for example, topics or subjects like systems of knowledge. I went to St. Aloysius sixth form. We had SRP, Social Responsibility Program. And in the moment for certain students, the fact that they would have to dedicate a certain amount of hours beyond their studies to fulfilling SRP might seem overwhelming, might seem pedantic. But when you really analyze and delve deep into the utility of these projects, they cannot be underestimated, they cannot be overlooked. And the more we emphasize their inherent nature in sustaining an empathetic society and a society which embraces solidarity, the more we get that message across from a younger age, the more we will have young people who aren't apathetic, who aren't cynical, who aren't disillusioned in the face of partisan politics, for example, but who really believe in the power of helping each other and of kindness.
Honestly, I think that everything that needed to be said was said, so I'm good.
Very good, very good. So what I'm hearing is that voluntary work supports, of course, the community at large in different ways. So whether it's we're helping in the soup kitchen or in shelters or with animals or with a number of different things, it's of course beneficial to society and to vulnerable maybe groups. But it's also beneficial to the volunteer or the active citizen themselves in terms of both professional and personal development. So it can shape even skills, soft skills, character building, etc. So my next question would be, how can we, as a community, even maybe as employers, maybe in education, how can we support young people to balance the reality of multiple commitments? Because at the end of the day, At some point, we are either in school or at work or both. Perhaps we have a family, perhaps we have a household. So sometimes we mentioned earlier that this could be an excuse, but this is also perhaps valid time limitation. What suggestions do you have in regard to how we can support the management of these different priorities better?
I think it goes very easily into the fact that it needs to be given credit. And I don't necessarily mean ECTSs or unit points, but specifically given credit. If it gets to actually having ECTSs and things like that, I think that is fantastic, because I do think it forms part of a person's non-formal and informal education, depending on your actions. But I do think that it comes from our teachers, our parents, and people who are in authority to give credit where credit is due. Because once again, I can give ideas from personal experience, where just today I had a student who received a comment that you didn't get an A in this one because you were so busy with your event last week. I mean, these types of behaviors or this attitude towards people who literally give time out of their own schedule to do something for another person's benefit, to get these types of comments, I mean, is very, very demotivating. And I think that the best thing that can truly encourage people or may allow them to balance multiple commitments is very much this culture of understanding the importance of volunteering.
I couldn't relate more to you, Jeremy. I mean, that comment alone, I'm not going to lie, it can get difficult being so busy, but as Francesco had said earlier, time management is essential. But at the end of the day, for me, the passion that I have for the things that I choose to devote my time to, it overrides the feelings of fatigue or demotivation that I might feel sometimes. They're still there, and we have to work through them. And we have to remember that at the end of the day, we're humans, and that self-care is essential, and that we have to take care of our mental health, and we shouldn't do more than we cannot bite off more than we can chew. And what I've learned as well across the years is that if you overburden yourself with too many commitments in the sphere of, volunteering and, your personal life, school life, work, for example, you wouldn't be able to perform in certain things to the best of your ability. So I would, as a piece of advice, really encourage people to be selective in order to find things that really do interest them and that they can really learn from and contribute to, so that they can make an impact on a deeper level. And not only that, it has to also come from the structures managing these volunteering projects, that they have to be more understanding, that there should be more flexible accommodating options with regards to young people's schedules and interests and preferences. And so this collaborative attitude, I feel, is really important. And what I've also come across recently, which I don't think we've adopted in Malta, is remote online volunteering, remote and online volunteering platforms, which I feel are really cool, to be honest. And it also pairs the digital literacy that I mentioned before. So when Jeremy mentioned as well, I think this is the most interesting thing that I got from Jeremy's insight, is the recognition and rewards. I feel that is so important. He mentioned the ECTSs, and in fact, my Croatian friend had mentioned that they have volunteer cards that when they present them, they can get certain discounts. But I feel like if there's more formal recognition and public acknowledgement and awards for what people do, more people would be motivated to prioritize volunteering in that sense, because I believe that everybody likes for their work to be recognized, not for personal gain or personal recognition, but more so for that measurable, quantifiable good that their work is doing for society.
Francesco, do you have anything to add to that?
Definitely, I agree completely, both with Jeremy and Cara. And something else that I would like to add is that maybe we should try and change our mentality towards what education means. Education is not just going to school and learning from textbooks, but you get so much from these opportunities, from these volunteering. You get to meet so many people. You get to learn so many new things that school can never give you on its own. So I think it's very important for us to acknowledge that, and even for policymakers to try and combine that into the school system, even if possible, so that you can get both and get a holistic experience of education at the end of the day.
I completely agree. If I can share from my personal experiences, so I found that when being an active student, there was a lot more that I could develop from the course itself. I studied psychology personally, and by being engaged directly with the community in different ways, I could understand what I'm studying much better and then apply it much easier when it came to getting a job and all of that. So at the same time, I think it's also satisfactory on a personal level. There's a personal satisfaction that comes with having achieved something, having done something for other people, and sometimes for yourself. Enough if you're organizing youth exchange and you participate yourself in it. It's also fantastic to have had the opportunity to create something where other people are enjoying it, but you're enjoying it yourself. So there's a lot of different elements. And a lot of you pinpointed already in terms of education. We mentioned the CTSs, Cara, you mentioned SRP, I believe, and Francesco, you're mentioning it as well, the integration into education. So I wonder if you have any other ideas along these as to how we can integrate it more, maybe into the curriculum, for example, into what it means to have civic responsibility, what it means to have community engagement, so that, as Cara said, we can integrate it into young people as early as possible.
I think there's two ways to do so. One of them is something that we can do ourselves as activists and students, as well as kind of our communities around us. And the other one is kind of more formal in nature. So the first one is to let go for once and for all the pressure, the academic pressure of we need to graduate as quickly as possible, as best as we can, before anyone else, to get the best possible job immediately, because my mother will be disappointed in me or something along those lines. Because what is happening is that people are taking up so much of their schedule with getting the most precise internship to where they want to get to, with the most precise subjects at university that they must get an A in to get to that point, is that it then disincentivizes you from taking on anything else. So beyond active citizenship, simply going to the gym, simply going out with your friends, and this mentality, I think it's an island mentality more than anything, is extremely unhealthy, and it is extremely stress inducing. And I think that it also leads to a large amount of unhappiness in your later years, where by trying these new things, by volunteering in even areas that might not have to do with what your career is, you develop an understanding of a bit of a jack of all trades, where you don't need to if you're going, I'm a graduated lawyer, for example. Just because I'm graduating and I'm specializing in European business law doesn't mean European business law is the only thing I know or that I need to know. So for example, from activism, I have learned how much I enjoy operations and management. And in fact, I'm applying for jobs in this area as well. So I think trying these new things and giving yourself the opportunity to try these new things without feeling bad, or your parents or whoever is relying on you to make you feel bad, I think is a super essential element. From a formal point of view, and then I'd say it's very simple in that it's, simple in words, but much more impractical in a wider sense of things, which is simply the education reform that everyone has been begging for. That, I mean, you have a larger focus on multidisciplinarity, that you have a different idea of how pedagogy works. So, I mean, having it directly involved in what you do, I mean, we see so many foreign schools that discuss how they're learning geography by actually being on a farm and things like. There's just so much. There's just so much, and I think that we probably have so many different experiences, and we can contribute so many different proposals of how we can do this. I don't want to go on forever.
I think this question alone could take another separate podcast. I really agree with what Jeremy said about sort of that academic validation and measuring our self-worth based on multiple different sources, not just academics or formal education. And civic education is something that's very close to my heart, so I won't take up too much time, but something that I've noticed through research that I've done personally is the concept of service learning curriculum, which basically it incorporates service learning components into the curriculum across all grades, all subject areas, students of all ages, and basically service learning, it combines academic learning with really hands-on community service. So by doing so, it really allows students to gain knowledge and skills which pertain to real-world issues and challenges, and thereby transferring what we learn on the textbook to what we see in real life. So bringing the classroom outside of the four classroom walls, essentially. And this really helps young people specifically and students in general cultivate a sense of empathy, of responsibility, and also helping people who are book smart also be real world situation smart as well. So I feel like the coexistence and the amalgamation of those two together is imperative, especially in the context of what we're speaking about today, active citizenship.
Very well.
Definitely. And I especially like that you mentioned that this should be done across all levels. I believe that it is crucial to introduce even children at primary levels, 5, 6, 7 years old, in the volunteering world. Like even on outings with teachers, that it could be a fun activity where you can be like, this happens, we can do that, and look what effect it's having. You're helping. And it creates such an empathetic value that it will benefit even education itself, because we can finally walk away from the competitive mentality of I need to get higher grades than you. That continues to make things worse, like Jeremy mentioned.
Very well, very well. Thank you all for your various points. I think it ties very nicely into the questions that I wanted to conclude with, which is more about suggestions of what we can start to incorporate or what ideas we can put forward as a result of this discussion. A lot of you have already mentioned different things that you've observed, maybe abroad or through other opportunities. So are there any trends, ideas, or opportunities that you're seeing maybe in other European countries that you think could be implemented in our society?
I'll jump in. I'll jump in here again. From what I've observed abroad, is that from let's say a financial point of view, there are very strong financial support systems. So to give an example of student councils, all student councils are either funded by the university or by the government. So that already allows for your job to be made easier. But there's also then the level of, for example, of my personal experience as well, which I think ties in a lot with other people's learning experience, that sometimes it's difficult to afford to do this. So I was lucky enough to have worked in gaming for a couple of years. Before then, I resigned to go kind of focus more time on student activism. So I had saved up enough money to spend 2 years in activism, whilst living a obviously less than lavish life. But I mean, this is a sacrifice that not many people are able to do. because everyone has their own obligations, and circumstances. So I was fortunate enough to fall into place in that sense. And the reality is that these things do take so much time, and even financially speaking, do take so much of your finances. So there are a lot of NGOs, a lot of people in activism who fork out money from their own pocket, which isn't right. And something that is a reality, which, given my legal background, kind of to a certain extent, I understand, but to another, I don't, is the extreme level of paperwork and obligations when it comes to anti-money laundering and CFT. I mean, if you're an organization with a budget of maximum 500, 1,000 euros a year, I mean, cut people some slack. I mean, if you're 3 people running one organization, you're going to spend half your time doing admin work, and maybe half your time, if you still have time left, to do the actual projects you want to do. So I think that finding a way to live and coexist whilst ensuring these checks and balances exist are essential.
Something that I've noticed in, the different talks that I've had related to these subjects is that I always try to bring something more, original, because unfortunately there's a tendency that these sort of podcasts, for example, are topics that are spoken about a lot, not spoken about enough. So that's why we're here. But what I really liked about our discussions today is that they were very fresh and dynamic. And even though there are things that I've spoken about already, the different takes that I've heard from Jeremy's and Francesco's perspectives were really rich. So, first of all, I'd like to thank you guys for that. And something else which I've really seen the invaluable benefit from is the experience of alumni. So personally, I've taken part in quite a few projects, and the fact that there are so many opportunities that exist that at times it may seem overwhelming, that we're spoiled for choice, but we wouldn't know exactly what fits our specific needs. So with that saturation, sort of how to deal with it would be having alumni being able to describe their own personal experience would be actually really helpful for that sort of dissemination of knowledge. And something else that I wanted to mention, apart from, testimonials and actually saying the lived relevance of certain projects, is that even though there are many opportunities presented to young people, I feel like they maybe aren't as well publicized or as well promoted or marketed as they could potentially be. And so maybe not as many people apply for them, or they don't reach their fullest potential. So by really leveraging social media in that way, we can really use it as a helpful platform rather to deliver our message more effectively. And and obviously this is a very difficult and challenging task to be able to grasp people's attention span within the first 5 seconds. But really and truly, the digitalization of today's society requires that to be an imperative. So the more we're able to connect with people online, and with that being said, the ability to connect with people who aren't in our own country. So in fact, the fact that within my project itself in More in 24, I can connect with people in member states who are I don't know how many kilometers away from me, and to share ideas with one another is really helpful as well.
Thanks to both of you. Francesco, do you have anything to add?
Yes, I believe something that I admire in other countries is that usually if something goes wrong, if something is not going as it's supposed to on a national and on a governmental stage, people aren't afraid to speak out, people aren't afraid to protest, and people generally aren't afraid to make their voice heard to bring change. Unfortunately, something that I notice a lot, and that it even happens to me, we do a lot of work in junior college, especially now regarding the European Union elections coming up. Unfortunately, many young people tend to disassociate with politics completely because they don't like the current system. That's completely understandable, but the system will never change if we don't make it change. So I believe that if we try and make the image of politics cleaner, like better and more that you can connect with it, that it's something close, that you can change it, that would be amazing, because it would solve many problems that as a country we are facing today because of youths not speaking up.
I think you've all made a lot of excellent suggestions, and I think there's a lot that we can take out from this discussion, even though it's such a short period of time. So I'm hearing that there's a lot of different ways we can engage young people better into being an active student, an active person in general. So my penultimate question would be to summarize your main points today. If you were making suggestions directly to a policymaker, what would you say you would like to see change in Malta in the coming 2, 3, 5 years?
Are we saying from a perspective of active participation, or are we talking in general?
It's up to you.
Well, I mean, realistically, I think one of the most important elements is consultation, real consultation, and that's the opinions of those who are actually concerned, as in stakeholders. The buzzword honey is essential. And then I would say second to that is to ensure as much as possible that no one is forgotten, and this goes into the extent that no one and nothing, and that as much as possible there is proper planning, there is proper consultation to then affect the changes to those plans. I think that is the most essential thing, because we can list a billion policies, but I think the principle that stands out is that.
Thank you, Jeremy.
And to bounce off of that, we really have to be careful to not fall into the trap of tokenism, that we cannot treat young people, especially as a criteria, as a checkbox that we'd be able to fulfill as a certain quota, for example, and because that can be very dangerous. And moreover, beyond consultation, as you said, Jeremy, actually affecting it and enacting it, to be able to view young people not only as points of consultation, but integrating them so deeply into decision-making policies that we would actually be able to shape the results on certain topics that directly do affect us. And with that, obviously, it will also require more mentorship programs, apprenticeships, traineeships, so we can learn from people who are more experienced than us and who have more just general life experience. But if I were to advise policymakers in this ambit, it would be to really consider the opinions and views of young people, because even though, for example, adults may look down on younger people due to their lack of life experience, we must disassociate that connection of age with experience, because it isn't that superficial.
And also as well, I believe that policymakers would do a much better job if they accept criticism, if they criticize themselves and the parties that they stand for, because that is what enables them to be better than what they currently are, and to congratulate and to acknowledge where the other side is doing well. That is really important. We need politicians and policymakers that work together to ensure the best outcome for everyone, as Jeremy and Cara mentioned. So politicians and policymakers need to go into that role, dive into that role with an open mind to work and collaborate, because I believe that would lead to many good and great things happening.
Thank you all. We have come to the end of this podcast. I think the time flew by for me. It was a very interesting discussion. So my final question to you, and I'll start with you, Francesco, is what is a final word of advice that you would like to give to young people in Malta in terms of this topic of active citizenship?
That's a hard one. I would say many things. But I think that no matter how tedious the current situation is, no matter how difficult it might seem to make change, that first action will lead to a springboard of many other things that will benefit society at large. So do not be afraid to make that first step, to enter the world of activism, and to even speak out when you need to.
Cara?
So I'm going to try to be as inspirational as I possibly can. So basically, as a young person in Malta as well, I'm 19, so I'm still young. I mean, we're at a very unique point in our lives. The world is ours to explore. We're discovering who we are. We might be overwhelmed about where we're headed, what tomorrow may bring, but I'd just like to remind all the young people out there in Malta and Gozo that you're capable of doing incredible things, of things you think you're not capable of doing. You have to believe in yourself, and you have to embrace this journey of life and passionate about. And whether it's, pursuing your studies, exploring hobbies, being more involved in your community, every step brings you closer to reaching your full potential. And there will be lots of challenges along the way, many obstacles. I'm not going to say that there won't be, but it is, those hardships and those doubts which will really mold you into the person, to define you into the person that you want to be, because it will help you dig into your inner strength, and that determination to keep pushing forward when times get difficult is really important. So, just as a final message and concluding remarks, don't forget to be kind, to uplift one another, to celebrate your successes, no matter how big or small that they may be. And ultimately, this generation is a really powerful one, and it's time to make, this is something I like to say a lot. It's time to make the world our playground, no matter how small our corner of it is, because Malta is a very small country, but it's a force to be reckoned with. So the time for action is now, and for all the young people listening, you can do it, you can make it happen, believe in yourself and go for it.
Mine's gonna be really short and sweet. Number one, give it a shot. What's the harm in that? And number two, I very much suggest that you try be the person that you wish you had yourself. That's it.
Thank you very much, Cara, Jeremy, Francesco. I really admire the three of you for being here and also for all the work that you're doing. I really appreciate the time that you've spent with us today and everything you've had to share. And I very much wish you well on all your endeavors and all your different roles and organizations and entities. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having us. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Cheers.
Thank you for watching our podcast. We hope you found it fruitful. So, what are we going to do with these podcasts?
On the 11th of May at the Valletta Design Cluster, our young people will be sharing the results of these podcasts and the research around the project to our guests, which will include MEPs and MEP candidates of the upcoming election.
Join us on the 11th of May at the Valletta Design Cluster by registering through the link on this post or by contacting us on info@ymcamalta.org.
See you there.